The most dangerous person to society is the needless individual. The reason he is uncontrollable, not because he is aggressive or harmful. Those in authority are terrified of people who attain full psychological independence, according to Carl Jung's research. This is because such people become immune to all systems that aim to manipulate human behavior. Imagine yourself strolling through the heart of a bustling city, rushing, scrolling, buying, uploading, and performing. That's what you'll see everywhere you go. Promotions, likes, affirmation, and the next big buy are what they're chasing. However, amidst all this commotion, there exists an individual who remains utterly motionless. This is not due to lethargy or disinterest. Rather, it is because this individual has discovered something that renders all that commotion meaningless. My term for it is psychological sovereignty. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This individual has achieved a level of self-actualization that poses a challenge to all global political systems, social media platforms, and corporations. They no longer rely on external validation to feel whole. What really worries people in charge, though, is that our whole social and economic structure rests on what I refer to as the dependency loop. Ads, political promises, and social media notifications are all there to keep you feeling like you're always going to be short on something. This trend kept popping up in Jung's patient records. Mass society works because people don't know who they really are, according to Jung's warning in The Undiscovered Self. According to him, the individual has always been unconscious of himself and has remained so. The mass takes care of this automatically. When a person awakens from this coma, what follows? When they become fully self-sufficient individuals, or when they undergo what Jung called individuation, the process of integrating all aspects of their psyche, they turn into the ungovernable man, as I like to describe them. That is the very thing that makes the system nervous. After delving deeply into the human mind for decades, Carl Jung came up with a groundbreaking revelation that revolutionized the field of psychology. The majority of individuals live their lives concealed behind a facade they created to conform to societal norms. Jung compared the persona to a mask. One wears it to leave an impression on others, and another wears it to hide one's actual character. Most people lose touch with their true selves when they immerse themselves in this disguise. Strange things happen as a person starts to individuate, when they start to integrate their shadow, anima, or animus, and when they eventually connect with their actual self, according to what Jung found. They lose the ability to be managed. The system is at risk at this point. The shadow, or all the aspects of ourselves that we have been trained to reject or conceal, was the subject of Jung's most revolutionary insight. According to him, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What I mean by this is the shadow paradox. Growing up, you learn to control your negative emotions and behaviors, including rage and selfishness. However, Jung found that denying these aspects of oneself leads to enslavement. You suffer from an anxiety disorder that makes you seek approval from other people all the time. But the man who has embraced his darkness has accomplished something truly groundbreaking. He has addressed his worst traits head-on and declared, "This is also me." Since a result, he is no longer enslaved by shame, since he has dealt with his shame. He isn't seeking validation, since he is satisfied with himself, flaws, and all. According to Jung, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. However, after such an endeavor, an extraordinary thing occurs. One becomes immune to emotional manipulation. That is not the end of Jung's procedure. What I refer to as the intermarriage follows the incorporation of the shadow. Every individual, according to Jung's discovery, has the potential for their polar opposite. Women harbor what he termed the animus, a masculine element, while men harbor what he termed the anima, a feminine force. The majority of individuals attribute these characteristics to other people. For example, women often seek for the ideal man to complete them, while men often hunt for the ideal woman to complete them. When you learn to balance these seemingly incompatible aspects of your personality, according to Jung, you no longer need another person to make you whole. According to him, the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow. The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well. But one must learn to know oneself in order to know who one is. A woman is no longer necessary for a man to access his anima, which includes his intuition, emotions, and nurturing abilities. No longer does a woman require a guy to validate her strength after she has integrated her animus, logic, assertiveness, and independence. This gives rise to what I refer to as the complete individual, a person whose psychological well-being makes them immune to attempts at manipulation through gender-based marketing or the promise of romantic fulfillment. Last but not least, Jung found the pinnacle of psychological development, coming into touch with one's own self, not just one's ego or persona, but one's entire identity. According to him, the self is the mental hub that controls everything else. Attaining this level signifies what I refer to as inner authority. Since they have discovered their own inner wellspring of knowledge, they no longer seek direction from others. Once individuals establish a connection with their inner compass, they no longer require gurus, influencers, or specialists to dictate their daily lives. He said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens." Because they are already living their truth, awakened people pose the greatest threat to any society. This is where things start to get interesting. The system acts in predictable ways when a person reaches this degree of psychological independence. They say you're dangerous, uncaring, and self-centered. Shaming you back into dependence is their goal. It was in his own life that Jung saw this pattern. The psychiatric elite shunned him once he abandoned Freud's beliefs in favor of his own. They sought to undermine him because he would not adhere to academic norms. Their assaults failed to strike at his very essence, as he had already done the inward work. This is the immunity factor. Having faced and embraced your own shadow self, you are no longer vulnerable to the destabilizing effects of external criticism once you have integrated all aspects of your psyche. Although you may not be flawless, you are whole, and that is an incredibly potent quality. I will demonstrate to you the grave threat this poses to our established systems of education and government. My concept of the expert dependency model is the bedrock upon which the entire system rests. Every system is set up to convince you that you can't comprehend reality without the help of an authority figure. Is psychology something you just don't get? A degree is required. Struggling to make choices? Seek out a master. Missing the point? Having a religious leader is essential. You lack the necessary qualifications to think independently. That much is constant. Achieving what I refer to as inner authority is what Jung's individuated person has accomplished. They're able to think critically on their own and won't let anyone else pass judgment on their behalf. He said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens." Even Jung's own teachings are called into question by these people. Integrating outward information with inner knowing is the path to genuine wisdom. They realize, not anti-intellectual per se, but they will not let another person's ideas supplant their own in the pursuit of personal growth. Even Jung himself cautioned against becoming too reliant on one's intelligence. He expressed gratitude. "Thank God I am Jung and not a Jungian. Politics and the economy are not the only domains affected. My term for the assumption that someone other than oneself can remedy one's problems and establish a political system is the savior complex. If you vote for me, I will restore economic growth. If you adhere to this philosophy, your life will have purpose. Belong by becoming a part of this movement." The individuated individual in Jung's theory, however, has done something revolutionary. They're now accountable for their own psychological development. He expressed concern. The mass-minded man, as an extension of his own personality, sees his personal experience confirmed by politics. However, A fully realized individual does not seek approval from political institutions to effect change on the outside. They know that transformation inside is necessary. They have rescued themselves via psychological means, so they're not looking for an ideal leader or system to rescue them. This renders them impervious to the manipulative power of fear-based propaganda. Our connection to social media is the clearest example of this danger. I call it validation addiction, and it's the driving force behind these platforms. People constantly seek for likes, comments, and shares to make them feel worthy. This whole paradigm collapses, however, as Jung's individuated person develops what he termed a personal contact with the unconscious. Once individuals establish a connection to their intrinsic value, they no longer seek affirmation from outside sources. As Jung put it, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. However, if you've done the inner work, the judgments of online strangers no longer matter. You're not aiming to impress anyone or perform for a crowd. This leads to what I refer to as the attention drought. When users cease providing the algorithm with the validation signals it needs, it stops seeing them. Furthermore, the social media industry as a whole is in danger from a populace that isn't interested in gaining popularity. When it comes to relationships, this change can be the most dangerous. We base our whole marriage and dating culture on the completeness myth, which states that in order to feel complete, one must find a partner. It was Jung who had a new perspective. According to him, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. However, this metamorphosis is only possible between fully formed people. Relationships are not a site of need for the individuated individual. Rather, they are a place of completeness. They aren't seeking a companion to alleviate their feelings of isolation or make them feel whole. Someone to complete them is what they're seeking. In my view, this results in what I term a conscious partnership, a bond between two independent people who aren't attempting to become one. Businesses that make money off of broken relationships can't take advantage of this type of bond. Something really important, which I refer to as the spiritual bypass, needs my immediate attention. As soon as they hear about Jung's theories, many want to avoid the difficult process of integrating them. Without seeing their own shadow, they seek enlightenment. This was a trap that Jung saw clearly. According to him, the most dangerous thing is to interfere with a natural process of development. No amount of rational thought can lead to individuation. Meditation won't help you escape your shadow. Working through what I term the dark night of the soul is a necessary evil. During this time, you will face all of your hidden aspects. I don't like it. It may not be photogenic, but it's vital. According to Jung, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. After completing this path, the individuated individual feels emotionally and mentally whole. About 12 to 13 minutes is required for integration. Note, this appears to be a section title or a note. Think about clarifying or eliminating it if it's unneeded. How does one go about attaining this level of psychological autonomy? Then, according to Jung, there are four main steps to individuation, which I refer to as the four pillars. Finding and embracing the aspects of yourself that you have rejected is the goal of shadow work. According to Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Examining your unpleasant emotions, such as jealousy, rage, and selfishness, head-on rather than bottling them up, is essential. Integrating your anima and cosmos means nurturing traits associated with the other gender. Intuitive, emotional, and receptive aspects of males should be embraced. Embracing your strong, rational, self-reliant self is a key for women. Recognizing your persona entails learning to distinguish between your true identity and the one you present to the world. The persona is a fictitious personality. It is a mask that an actor wears to project himself in a role. The essential thing is to wear the mask intentionally instead of becoming one with it, as Jung cautioned. Connecting with one's own psyche's archetype of meaning, or the part of one's psyche that is bigger than one's ego, is what Jung dubbed self-connection. This is something I call the daily individuation practice, and I'll give you some concrete methods to start it. Shadow spotting. Whenever you pass severe judgment on another person, stop and think about what you're rejecting in yourself. According to Jung, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In other words, the things that you find objectionable about other people might actually be insight into your own shadow side. Flexibility in persona. Be aware of the times when you're acting and the times when you're being genuine. Dreams, fancies, and intuitive insights are the natural ways for the mind to communicate, according to Jung's theory of inner dialogue. Listen to these inner voices instead of always looking for approval from outside sources. Friends, family, and society at large will all do their best to get you to revert to your previous ways of behaving. So be wary of conformity pressure. When Jung departed from traditional psychology, he personally felt this. He pointed out, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Becoming authentic, however, frequently necessitates letting go of the people who are content with your phony persona. When you refuse to participate in group activities, such as playing games, people will accuse you of being selfish, difficult, and antisocial. Do not lose sight of the fact that these responses indicate you are well on your way. People probably noticed a shift in your behavior before you ever said anything about your development if they start treating you differently as a result. Only threats are met with resistance by the system. One sign that you are liberating yourself from other people's control is if your pursuit of psychological independence causes others discomfort. What I refer to as genuine isolation is one of the most challenging aspects of this journey. Some relationships may have been more about showing off than actually connecting with each other when you stop putting other people's needs before your own. Here is something that Jung cautioned against. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Once you begin to accept yourself, you'll notice that a lot of others have only ever embraced your persona. The contradiction, though, is that this solitude is really liberation. People around you no longer like you when you put on an act. When you open yourself up to people who love you for who you really are, you make room for genuine connections. One of the most essential relationships you can cultivate is the one with yourself. According to Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. To do this, one must be prepared to spend time alone with themselves. You start to rely on your internal resources for authority, approval, and control rather than seeking them from other sources as you go along. According to Jung, this was the process of reaching one's full potential. The author said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens?" Because they are masters of themselves, enlightened people don't feel the need to dominate others. A presence that commands respect without drawing attention to itself is born from this. People perceive you as being on a higher plane of awareness. You're not easily manipulated, needy, or reactive. The ability to read people without needing their approval can be achieved by just saying, "I see you, but I don't need you." Because you have evolved into what Jung referred to as a conscious individual in a world of unconscious masses, you pose a threat to control systems. The real danger to the powerful, though, is that individuation spreads like wildfire. People are compelled to live their own honest lives when they witness others doing the same. According to Jung, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This causes what I term the authenticity virus to spread. When one person achieves true individuality, it might motivate many to do the same. Not by revolution, but by the evolution of consciousness, do systems change. Another thing that Jung cautioned about was the collective shadow. When big groups don't deal with their own shadows, they tend to blame other people, groups, or countries for their problems. According to him, the individual has always been unconscious of himself and has remained so. The mass takes care of this automatically. But when people begin to work on themselves psychologically, they no longer take part in group projections. Because they have internalized their own otherness, they are no longer susceptible to manipulation into hatred. Because they have discovered safety within, they are not frightened into giving up their independence. Political propaganda, based on fear, cannot affect people because of this. Well, I mean, when I say creative explosion is one of the most lovely things about becoming an individual. As Jung found out, being in touch with one's real self has a way of boosting creativity. He pointed out, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity. The individuated person is driven to create by an inner need rather than by societal expectations. They just naturally express themselves in a way that no one else does. They have no desire to acquire popularity or impress. The end product is what I term uncorrupted art, creative expression that is free from the influence of commercial interests. The idea of individuation isn't novel, as Jung came to learn. Many world wisdom traditions describe it, including indigenous shamanism, Eastern philosophy, and Christian mysticism. According to him, the individual has always been unconscious of himself and has remained so. But in every culture, there have been those who achieved consciousness. These individuals became the wisdom keepers, the ones who couldn't be controlled by temporal power. The wise are always the first victims of authoritarian regimes because they offer a threat to the legitimacy of authority from without, the possibility of inner authority. And that is the greatest danger to any control-based system. Differentiation is of paramount importance in this era of digital connectivity. Social media algorithms, targeted advertisements, and polarized news cycles are just a few examples of the many messages that aim to keep us unconscious. However, Jung's individuated individual has acquired a defense mechanism that I refer to as psychological immunity. They are free to move around in these systems as they like. To them, technology is merely a tool, not an end in itself. Since they do not seek approval from others, they do not have an addiction to notifications. They have assimilated their shadow selves, therefore political material does not affect them. They are self-aware enough to know what they want, therefore ads can't influence them. Additionally, the individuated person's perspective on wealth and material belongings is different. According to Jung, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. When you're clear about what you value, you stop buying things to fill psychological voids. They are able to distinguish between desires and necessities. They perceive status symbols as outward manifestations of their own insecurity, so they aren't impressed by them. Their value is independent of material goods, thus they don't fret over losing them. This leads to what I term economic freedom, the ability to be content with less rather than more. Capitalism based on consumption poses a threat to those who do not require constant consuming. Among individuation's many positive effects on health, Jung discovered, when real pain cannot be alleviated, neurosis steps in. Illness as avoidance stops showing up in your body when you stop avoiding your psychological truth. As a result of settling inner disputes, psychosomatic harmony, the integration of mental and physical health, improves. When you're at peace with yourself, you can sleep better, have more energy, and age more gracefully. Last but not least, Jung found that individuation gets you ready for the last individuation, which is death. According to him, shrinking away from death is unhealthy and abnormal, robbing the second half of life of its purpose. After experiencing ego death, the breakdown of the persona, and the revelation of something more profound and everlasting, the individuated person has no fear of death. Since they aren't holding on to life in terror, but are instead experiencing it to the fullest, seizing every moment, they exude an air of tranquil strength. My challenge to you is this: quit sitting around and hoping things will change. Make some changes to who you are. Give up trying to find help from other sources. Achieve personal heroism. Give up trying to prove yourself to other people. Start doing the inner work necessary to validate yourself. According to Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Take advantage of this opportunity. It is extended to you. Grow psychologically independent to the point where they pose a threat to control systems, rather than rebelling against them. Take baby steps. Identify one area where you're acting instead of being yourself among other people. Challenge a belief you have never thought to question. Accept and embrace one facet of your shadow self that you have been denying. Keep in mind that a man who stops relying on the system eventually develops an immunity to it. That is the height of defiance in a society that actively seeks to keep you poor, destitute, and reliant. If you've seen these changes happening to you, jot them down. My breaking point became my breakthrough. Not because he seeks destruction, but because he is uncontrollable. The destitute man poses the greatest threat to society. He has accomplished what Carl Jung referred to as the labor of a lifetime by coming into his own identity. And being unconscious is never the same when you've had that kind of mental freedom. You have evolved into what Jung referred to as a self-aware being amidst a collective unconscious. It's all up to you. That's the danger you pose to control systems. You have given the world the gift of unbreakable individuals who refuse to be bought, bullied, or broken. I go into Jung's thoughts on the extremely sensitive person who sees what others overlook in my film on the rare aura only true empaths carry. If this resonates with you and you want to investigate Jung's psychology of the uncommon individual further, you should watch it. A single step is all it takes to achieve psychological independence. Use it right now. Thank you for tuning in. Until we meet again in another realm.